everyone, welcome back to recap number 7 of the Reykjavik Open. This time I am playing a very strong player. Going into round 6, at this point in the tournament I have 3.5, so it's pretty good, but now I'm facing a 2300 FIDE master who's only 21 years old. I was pretty scared coming into this. I had only 30 minutes to prepare before the round, and here is my preparation. My opponent starts with d4, I go with d5, and after c4, e6, knight f3, c6, my opponent goes for g3. This marks the start of a Catalan opening from the white pieces, a very sharp and popular opening that white plays and that I suffer against. So this time I decided to play some prep for the first time, and I actually played d takes c4, accepting a pawn up in exchange for my opponent gaining activity in this position, which is always very sharp. It's going to be a sharp game. What do you want? Bishop g2 to defend and put the bishop along this very nice, now newly open diagonal a little bit. I go b5 to defend my pawn, and after knight e5 challenging c6, I defend with bishop b7. My opponent keeps on challenging with a4, threatening to take on b5, so I have to respond with a6, defending that pawn. Castles, and meanwhile, given all my pawn moves, I have not developed many of my minor pieces and all of my heavy pieces, so I am completely behind on development for this pawn up that I have accepted. So I have to finally develop knight f6, and I'm still in book at this point. I had memorized a game that my opponent had played in this line, and I was pretty well prepared. So here after b3, I just take, queen takes. So you see how my opponent activates his pieces for nothing, right? I used a pawn move, he uses a queen move, activates on that square. Meanwhile, my development is so slow, it's eternal, it's crazy. So here I go queen c8. Queen c8 transposes later on to an okay line, but it's actually really imprecise here, and the deep engine will give +1 to white after knight d2. What I should have done is bishop e7, and as you'll see in the game, it completely transposes after what I did. So my opponent is kind of out of book at this move by accident, right? And he ends up taking a long turn with a takes b5. I take back with the a pawn, but between us, I had revised this in theory on the bishop e7 line, like I have bishop e7 instead of queen on c8 here. But because I played queen on c8, which is actually not that good, I have c takes b5 and defending my bishop, and here this is okay for black, and kind of a better version than the game, which is kind of crazy. So I actually took with the a pawn here, still being in book, and now my opponent is back in book. After takes takes, queen a2 attacking my bishop, I play my bishop back, and now on queen a7, my bishop is supposed to be on e7 in the other line, right? And then in that line, I'm supposed to play queen c8, defending my bishop. Well, here, my bishop's already defended, and I go bishop e7, and it just transposes to this exact same thing, which I found very funny. Now, I had studied still beyond this line. We are on move 14 that I memorized 30 minutes before the round. Here, my opponent should continue with knight c3, threatening to take this b5 pawn for free. And then I had studied that after b4 kicking the knight, knight a4, I have to defend these squares with knight f d7, bishop f4, and this is due in part to the bishop e7 move. Now I have g5 kicking the bishop, really crazy line. And this references a game by a 2500 GM Luca Moroni from Italy. But none of this happened. My opponent surprised me with knight d2, and now I am completely out of book after only 15 moves of theory. So I play what I had studied, which is the best move, knight f d7, recycling those ideas. We're happy to see that. And now my opponent plays bishop a3, and as you can see on the screen, my time says 1 hour and 31 minutes, which means that I have not used an ounce of my time in the past 16 moves of this game. So on bishop a3, I'm really out of book. I have to take time and figure out how to best this position. It's really not obvious for black. First of all, if I take here, queen takes, and I can never castle here. So this was immediately out the garbage. I liked bishop d8, threatening to trap the queen, but here white can just play knight e4 and threaten knight d6. So that's out the garbage. Then I looked into b4. I didn't like 2 moves for white here. Rook b1, very ambitious first move. And if I take here, the rook can take on b7 and threaten rook c7, and then you win the c6 pawn, and it's looking quite over, actually. There's also bishop takes b4, which I had looked at, but I thought that here it was a bit too ambitious, sacking 2 pieces, and black can cover this up. But yeah, rook b1 looks completely winning, and I said this in the analysis room to my opponent. My opponent said, no, I was prepared to just play bishop b2 on b4. And I was like, what? Giving up a tempo? There's no way. I would have castled here and been so happy. That's why I didn't play b4. I would have played b4 if bishop b2 would have worked. No. So instead, I go with knight a6. Now I have to be honest with you, as you see the eval bar drop, white is better here, but it's for a specific reason. You see, the best move here to retain equality for black, who is up a pawn already, is to swap bishops here, give this diagonal, and beyond that, play c5 to block the diagonal so that we can castle. And then, if you trade here and take this pawn, you win a pawn. Oh wait, sorry. Trading knights first, otherwise the knight's hanging, and then you take a pawn. Here, after castles, it's completely equal. Black has given back the pawn, and we reach equality. That's what I should have gone for. A non-greedy option that just equalizes the game, which I find kind of fascinating. Instead, I decide to retain the pawn and go knight a6, and this position goes sour. And my opponent plunges into a really deep calculation and finds bishop takes e7, king takes, and now he thinks for like 10, 15, 20 minutes. It's insane. And I'm there at the board like, what is he looking at? My position is so solid, my queen and bishop. My bishop is defending the pawn, my bishop's defending the knight. I'm threatening queen b8 to trade off queens on the next move. My queen's defending this knight immediately. Like, everything seems to be working, and as well, this is part of the idea. My rook is defending my queen, and my queen is escalating to a8 to trade queens. It's just like this position is now being revived. So after a long think, my opponent goes with this incredibly surprising bishop takes c6. I mean, I just don't know what to think about it. I'll put a brilliant move on it for now. The more I looked at this, the more I was even more confused. First of all, I don't know why this is sacrificed. Can anybody see why this works? Because I was looking at it and I was confused for like minutes on end. Okay, you're sacking a bishop, you're threatening my bishop, so it's pretty forced that I take back with this bishop. So far so good. The natural follow-up is rook c1, attacking my bishop. And now I have really one only move. I can't move the knight back here to defend because it's pinned. So I have knight a b8. And my opponent, still in his sacrifice, goes queen a3 check. Queen a3 check identifies this d6 square and wants to drill a knight on d6. So that if I go king e7, knight e4, and I'm frozen. My position is absolutely frozen. Here, I can't go king e8. If I go king d8, I hop into this fork here, can't do that. So I go with king f6. And now my opponent gets excited, rightfully so, once again. And he goes with this astounding, brilliant sacrifice. Rook takes c6. Sacrificing a rook and really just leaving me in a completely losing position here. If I take with the knight here, my opponent has a simple checkmate in 2 with knight e4 check. Remember, the queen is still taking up this square. So my king is forced to f5, and now queen f3 is checkmate. Embarrassing, I can't lose like that. So I have to sacrifice my queen to take back this rook. If I just move the queen, it's the same mate in 2, so there's no real, the queen takes and I take up e4 is the concept. But after knight takes, like I had seen this, but I have to play it out. Queen here, and it's a forced resignation. I just don't have enough to continue after queen takes and then rook b8. Black just doesn't have enough here to continue. So after 23 moves, my opponent absolutely demolished me and forced a resignation here. 2 brilliant moves by my opponent, sacrificing the rook and sacrificing the bishop. Absolutely astonishing. I hope you enjoyed another masterpiece by my opponents. This is the second game that I lose in under 25 moves in this tournament. If you want to check out round 1, I lost in 12 moves as well. It was pretty painful. Thank you so much for watching recap number 7, and number 8 is coming tomorrow.